When we think about the decisions that shape our lives, we often tend to think about the big decisions, the promotion we got, the deal we made, the house we bought. But in my experience, looking at the last 10, 15 years, the decisions that actually shape our lives, our businesses, our careers, are those decisions that actually didn't feel important at the time. We can think of them as the quieter decisions, the decisions that were made on a random Tuesday afternoon when there's no meetings, no noise, nothing really at stake. And interestingly enough, those are the key decisions that shape our future, that shape our lives going forward. And the good news is we actually can start noticing them now. Okay, so let's unpack that in a bit more detail. The loud decisions are often the ones that we recognize. The big announcement, the massive AGM with the hype around it, the big product launch that's all over social media and the internet. Those ones feel important, and they are, but there's extra hype to make them feel important. And often to get to that big decision or that big event, we will analyze it to death. There will be meetings and subcommittees and sensitivity analysis and scenario testing, which is all good and well, but that's the loud decisions that are made. And if I were to look at my career, one fundamental thing that happened in my career was something so subtle, something that often happened on those Tuesday afternoons where I was invited into meetings as a junior staff member, and my role was just to listen. And there were times where the seniors would tell me that my role is not to speak. And you'd often ask yourself, or I'd ask myself, if I'm not speaking, how am I contributing? And interestingly enough, it took me many meetings later to understand that the purpose for me to be in that meeting was not to contribute. The purpose for me was to listen, to observe, and to learn. And as I say, those Tuesday afternoon meetings where nothing much is at stake, where an initial discussion with a potential client could be happening, I observed how senior leaders debated, how they discussed, how they unpacked a problem and a potential solution, how they walked away because people just couldn't agree. And interestingly enough, those meetings were quiet, no hype around it. They were consistent, and they happened over and over and over. And that's where the compounding effect happened for my learning in those meetings. And we'll speak about the compounding effect later. But I'd like to go back to how we see these patterns about the loud decisions and the soft decisions in business. If we were to ask a CEO about a massive M&A deal that was done 5 years ago, often you'd get the detail behind it. The deal was done in a specific way, and these are all the decisions we made and all the stakeholders of the party, which is important because a very massive deal was made. But what about asking about revenue growth on a specific line of business? And the answers could be many, and it could be in the quieter decisions. So for example, the decision to invest rather than cut costs, the decision to hire someone or to promote someone internally rather than hire externally, or the decision to walk away from something while others are moving forward because they see it as a win-win situation and we may see it as a loss-making situation. Unfortunately, those type of decisions are never documented in case studies and are often forgotten about as a small decision that was made just to move forward. So the core question is, why do we as human beings systematically overweight those loud decisions and underweight the softer or quieter decisions? And the answer is actually quite simple. It's how our brains handle time. Now, behavioral finance actually has a name for it or a word for it, and it's called hyperbolic discounting. And that's basically where the brain dramatically overweights what's in front of us right now, and similarly or conversely underweights what could be in front of us in the future. And maybe just two easy examples. The one would be that our brain would tell us that 100 Rand right now is more valuable than 150 Rand in the future. Or another example would be a success or a win today is a lot more valuable than success or a win a year from now. And unfortunately, that is just the way in which the human mind or the brain is wired. And if I take this back to business and look at some of the more successful boards, They obviously have to look at profitability of the business and running the business properly, but the decisions are made for the long term, not only for short term gain, but long term sustainability of the business. And the question that often is asked in those successful businesses is, we're making this decision today. How does it impact us in 5 years' time? Or better than that, how would the business look like in a decade from now? So are we making decisions now for the long-term sustainability? And can we hold to this decision in 10 or 15 years' time? Or whoever were to be looking after the business in the future, would they be happy with the decisions that we've made? And often, conversely, companies that have failed have been where decisions were made solely for short-term gain. And in the long term, the business just actually can't sustain that. And I believe that the core behind this is the discipline to make decisions for the long term while knowing that sometimes in the short term you're not going to gain immediately. Now, the problem with businesses is, or the problems in which businesses have been created is for short-term gain. And I don't mean short-term in terms of weeks or months. I mean in annual cycles. Now, if we think about it, we're looking at quarterly results. We publish biannual SENS announcements. We look at performance metrics that give us annual incentives. And that is all short-term. We should be looking at outcomes into the future. And if we look at the meaningful outcomes like culture, market position, brand, talent pipeline, those only develop in 5 to 15 years, not even in 1 to 3 years' time. And the obvious question is, if quiet decisions are so small, how do they end up mattering so much? Let's unpack that. Compound interest. Compound interest is one of the most powerful ideas in finance, and it's basically small, consistent additions over long periods of time have an enormous impact on the outcomes. Now, the challenge we have is when we use the word compounding or compound interest, we match it or attach it to a finance concept. And it does have a place in finance, but compounding is actually something we apply to our everyday lives. If I can use a few examples, let's take someone who is a subject matter expert in a very technical field. Yes, that person may have made a fundamental, big, loud decision at some point in their early life to pursue that career or that field, but it took many years of hard work, dedication, effort, showing up, studying the late nights consistently to get to that point where the person can call themselves that subject matter expert. If we go back to the example about me being invited to those Tuesday afternoon meetings where I was requested or required not to contribute and not to talk, but over time, learning and listening in those meetings has actually developed me to get to the point where I can sit in meaningful meetings and have meaningful debates with people. Those consistent small actions actually have a big impact over time. The biggest challenge that we have, again, is consistency is not easy. Consistency is actually remarkably hard. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, tomorrow I'm going to run a marathon. Similarly, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, tomorrow I'm going to become the CEO of that listed company that I love so much. It takes years of effort, of hard work, consistency, and the small efforts that compound over time to get us to that point. The other part about compounding is that it also has negative effects to it. So we often speak about compounding as a positive, but the converse or inverse is actually the same. Small bad decisions or small negative decisions do not seem catastrophic at the time, but in the long term, it often has very catastrophic outcomes. The biggest challenge with that is it's very difficult to reverse those outcomes. So for example, if we were to treat a customer in a very subtle way badly, over time, ultimately that customer would find a supplier or service provider who can treat them better. And over time, slowly your customer base would erode. The decisions that we make have both positive and negative outcomes. The positive ones consistently over time have massive outcomes that are positive to us. However, the negative ones have catastrophic outcomes that, again, we can't reverse easily over time. So what do we do with all of this? Here's what I've come to believe. So, in closing, if we were to look back at our lives in the next 10 or 15 years, I don't think we'd remember clearly the deal that we made and call it a deal that shaped our life in its entirety. It may probably be that that random Tuesday afternoon decision is the decision that we made that actually shaped where we get to in the future. And based on that, we need to start taking those decisions more seriously because they actually matter more than we think.